Hello and welcome to the Patient First podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin, where we are, of course, looking to increase the influence of today's engaged dentist by, you guessed it, putting the patient first. Today, we have another Books Applied to Dentistry. One of my favorite topics. I love reading books. I love reading business books because I'm weird like that, especially for dentists. But I know there's a lot of you out there, but I have a good recommendation, I think, for you today, which is The Road Less Stupid, Advice from the Chairman of the Board by Keith J. Cunningham. Now, this book is, I think, by and large about business strategy, which I think is underrated in most dental practices. I think that business strategy is important, even if you have a relatively, what I would say, like a mature business idea, like being a dental practice, especially in a time like now when there's so much change going on, how to creatively solve problems. I would definitely recommend this book. And I'm really going to highlight just one big idea because it's one of my favorite things to do personally that we're going to talk about during this book. So there's a lot of big pictures throughout this entire book about running a business. So if you haven't really thought again about your practice as a business, I think this is a great book to kind of get those gears turning. It opens up some great thoughts about how to think strategically. And again, in this podcast, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite things to do in business, which is to think strategically, to take some alone time to really flush out ideas and come up with creative solutions to whatever you have. Keith calls this thinking time. So there's many people, and this has been detailed if you read business books, a lot of different books call something different. Clarity breaks, vision time, or Keith calls it thinking time. Most great business leaders that you read about do something like this. Bill Gates is famous for staring out the window. Steve Jobs would go for long walks to think by himself. All of this is typically by yourself if you are the leader of a business, to come up with some creative ideas on how to get things to the next level in an area that you're thinking about. And by the way, this isn't just for business, right? I think just for life in general, to take a step back, to have some time to think about something is very important. But obviously we're applying this to your dental practice, to dentistry. And I don't think that that's common for dentists to do, to sort of take a step back and really just think about some business issues by yourself. And I think it can be very, very effective. So some thinking time tips from our man, Keith J. Cunningham, which are huge for me because I've struggled quite a bit sometimes on what I call clarity breaks, where I would go off and spend a whole day or a half a day, and sometimes they're effective, sometimes they're not. And Keith's tips are going to be great for me because I've incorporated some of this before. I'm going to incorporate a lot more going forward now. But if you haven't tried to schedule thinking time to strategize and solve problems in your life or in your business, I think these will shortcut to you being much more effective than Bryan has over the last few years, as I've struggled like to schedule a whole day. And then I get there and I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. And then I just start doing emails and the time kind of just goes away and it's wasted. So I think this may lead to many breakthroughs for me personally and for my companies and hopefully for you too. So here's some tips. Number one, and this I think is probably the biggest one. Prior to your thinking time, come up with 1 to 5 topics for you to think about. Okay, this is an important one for me because I've sometimes I think that this topic is just going to spring to my brain. And sometimes it doesn't. And oftentimes I think of an idea, something that, I have an issue that I want to unpack or think about, but don't have time at that time. And you just kind of assume you'll think about it later. And that doesn't happen. So now I have a list that I keep in I use a OneNote journal where I'm capturing ideas that I want to think about when I do have thinking time. And I schedule this, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The next piece is to prioritize prior to your thinking time. So you take your list, and then right before your thinking time or at some time before it, you want to list off your 1 to 5 topics in the order that you want to think about them, because we want to think about the most important things. And key here is to not try to get to a fast solution. The idea of thinking time is to really think broadly. And so it is much more effective to even get halfway through a solution to your highest priority issue than to solve 5 things quickly. Because what you'll find out is that if you get rushed to a solution, that thinking time topic will probably be back on your thinking time sheet at some point in the future. So 5 examples, again, we're taking these concepts and applying them to dentistry. So, and for those of you who haven't strategized before, I wanted to come with 5 concrete examples that may help you, that you might be struggling with in your practice to spend your first thinking time about. So number 1, and these are come from my own life, obviously, from running a practice. So number 1, how do I shift my recruiting new team members to selecting the best applicants that are always in front of me? So instead of needing to go out and put an ad, how do I have a massive pile of well-qualified applicants in front of me to select from when we have an opening in the office? So that's number 1. Number 2, who actually are my ideal patients and how do I reach them easily? Maybe you've never thought about who your ideal patients are, and not broadly, but very specifically. And one big tip, think of specific people. Like when I say your favorite patients, who are the 3 people that pop in your brain? Write them down and then figure out how you can reach more people like them. That's one thinking time topic. Number 3, if I wanted to double the size of my practice and only had 12 months to do it, what would be the easiest way to accomplish this? You might think, man, that's a big goal. What I was thinking is, how do I 5x my practice in the next 2 years when I sat down to thinking time topic personally? But I don't want to scare you off. So just think as big as you can topic, because you'll find out if you have a big question, you'll come up with more creative answers. And you may not want to do them, but at least if you obviously choose this as a thinking time topic, you're going to probably want to grow your practice. So how do I 10x my practice in the next 12 months? It's possible. But when you come up with the solutions, you might go, oh, I want to do that. Or you might say, I'm cool with where I'm at. So another thinking time topic. Number 4, what potential threats do I have to overcome in my practice? And I'm thinking things like security, liability, theft. Those are just examples. But so what potential threats do I have to overcome in my practice? And how do I tighten those things up, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like we move fast and then there's some holes to sort of like shore up on the side of the boat of my business. And that's a good thinking time topic. What do I do every day that I can have others do instead of me to free me up to do higher level activities like thinking time? What can you delegate to others, right? I think that there's a lot probably going on in everybody's practice and everybody's business in everybody's life that they can probably offload to somebody else. Obviously, if you love it and you're good at it and it doesn't distract you from doing your higher level activities, you don't have to give it up. But if it's something you don't even like doing, there's probably procedures you're even doing that you could delegate to an associate or to a specialist that you don't even like doing. Just make a decision to not do it anymore, right? That's procedures. But then there's everything from organizing your burrs or go down the list of the things that you might be doing every day in your practice that somebody else can do. But then the key is when you have extra time to do more high-level activities like strategy thinking through thinking time. So some suggested rules, which are going to be very good for me, taken from Cunningham. He recommends 60 minutes. Now, like I said, I've done clarity breaks where they've been a day or half a day. And so I would say 90 minutes because 90 minutes is what the average person's attention span can be when you're focused. But Keith says 60 minutes, and I'm not going to argue with him because it's his book. But I would also say to give yourself the freedom to stop whenever, although I wouldn't really, myself, I can't stop whenever, give myself that freedom because I'll just stop. But also, I do think it makes sense to have extra time. Don't schedule a meeting in 60 minutes because then you'll be looking at the clock, or at least if you're like me, you will. I need to have extra time to know that I have a cushion that if I'm on a roll, I want to keep going. Because sometimes, my book, The Patient First Manifesto, that you can get for free. I'm sure there's click around this podcast. There's a free link, or go to thepatientfirstbook.com. That came out of one 20-minute thinking time where I thought about a book and I had it all mapped out in my brain, very clear, and it took me 10 days to write. And it's been one of the best things I've ever done. It came out of one thinking time session. Obviously there was a lot kind of banging around in my subconscious that led to that. And I had a lot of sort of pre-thought by doing a podcast and other things. But the thinking time can be, you'll have sessions. If you schedule this regularly, you'll have breakthroughs where something like a book will come out of it, right? Or you'll figure out how to double your practice in 6 months. It really does happen. So 60 minutes, Keith recommends. I would say longer, 90 minutes or half a day even is even better if you have a day off of seeing patients. Schedule a couple hours and give yourself the freedom to go a little longer if you need to. There's 3 different scenarios that Keith details. One is a new topic. I've never thought about doubling my practice. I'm going to think about that today. That is a new topic. Number 2, revisiting a question. Sometimes you come to an idea, a thought process, and then you come to a resolution, and then you have to go back and you're thinking, then it shows back up on the radar, right? If you don't come to a complete solution, or if you didn't have all the data or whatever, there are scenarios where you're going to want to revisit a question. So don't get rid of your questions, keep them, because you may want to revisit them later. And this can be the most valuable, right? Can't tell you the number of times that I thought, well, we've solved this, we implement something, and then whatever happens, you focus and things go off track at the practice. And we have to revisit and basically redo what we already did, but with more information. So we might want to do it slightly differently the next time. Maybe it'll stick a little more, or maybe we want to improve on it a little bit. And the third scenario is how to implement an idea or an answer. So you may come to a good resolution, like, if I want to double my practice in the next 12 months, I will buy 1 or 2 more practices and merge it into mine. And then you have 12 other things that you're thinking about. And then when you get down to it, you go, you know what, that merging another practice with our existing practice, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do another thinking time on how do we find the right practice and then, how do we incorporate it? How do we merge the teams? How do we merge the technology? All of those things those may be, how do you implement a solution is a third scenario. So when you're going into thinking about a topic, have in mind, is this something new? Am I repeating something, or am I kind of extending the answer to a prior thinking time? It will help frame the strategies that you come up with. Keep in mind also that it may take multiple thinking times to address a single issue, right? Options may arise. You may come to a decision that needs to be executed, and it may require more thinking time. So if you don't come to a final resolution, but you've made progress, that is what we're looking for, right? Progress, not perfection. We're not a perfect answer. We're looking to make big progress. And when it comes to thinking time, you really want to think broader, so you come up with creative answers that you wouldn't otherwise think of. And key to thinking time, and this is a hard one, I know it's really hard for me, is no distractions, right? Turn off the notifications turn off your phone, get locked into a spot. And if you need help with this, which is something I definitely need help with, there's an earlier podcast about that we did on the book Effortless by Greg McKeon that talks about this, or read the book Indistractable, which is, I can't remember the author's name, but Indistractable is a good book that I would recommend to how to get rid of distractions during this time frame. You want to be untouched by the world, unless have this sort of like bat phone emergency. If you need to, if you can't take 60 minutes out of your day and be completely non-distracted. But that's key, because if you get distracted, it's like, this is a flywheel that has to get spinning. And what you'll find out is the absolute, whether you take 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or half a day, the most valuable time, the best ideas you'll likely have are towards the last third of your time that you have. There's something magical about that last third, and you'll never get there if you get distracted, because then it's like a flywheel that has to start all over again. So make sure to be indistractable. So some advanced tips that I have for you. This comes just from other things that I've heard from before and incorporated into my thinking time. Do it in the same place at the same time as much as possible. Stephen King, if you Google what his routine is, he's very regimented about writing. This is a guy who's written how many books, right? And the reason why he can produce so much is that he has the same routine every day. At the same time, he has the same breakfast. He sits down in the same chair with his papers in the exact same spots, with the same drink in the same location. And what that does is it cues your brain, now is thinking time, right? So it shortcuts you to go directly into your creative thinking, because you've kind of like habitualize yourself to that. It's like when a batter goes up to the bat and everybody's got their little ritual, right? Or golfers when they're getting ready to putt, right? They have a little ritual. What that does, those little rituals that sort of like tee up so to speak, gets your brain into going, oh, this is what we're doing now. And if you do that before your thinking time, you'll be much more effective because you won't have to have as big of a buildup for your subconscious to kind of realize, oh, now's the time when we're thinking creatively. So look for the same chair, the same time, arrange the same way as much as possible, especially if you can have I have a special chair in my office that I use just for thinking time. It sits there. It's like a chaise lounge. I know it sounds weird, but it cues my brain when I sit in there. Oh, that's what we're doing. We're strategizing. We're thinking bigger. It's really effective. Look for possibilities, not answers. You don't want to be critical of things that you're thinking about at first. When you think of how am I going to double my practice in the next 12 months, don't start judging your answers before you've written them down. Write them down, because what you'll find out is that you'll come up with some sort of crazy things that make no sense, but then you'll come up with something you're like, wait, actually that does make sense. If I do A, B, and C, we can make that happen. Typically, at the end of your session, like I said before, it's going to be the most effective. So if you don't get off to a great start right away, that's all right. Just sometimes you have to drudge through some slow areas before you get to the magic, which is that last third of the thinking time. Those are my tips. And I hope that you try them out. Let me know, like, subscribe, share, and please comment and let me know if you did. I'd love to hear if you never tried thinking time before and you tried it out. The first time could feel very, very strange, but I can tell you that, I've come up with a lot of different ideas, from therapeutic virtual reality, tooth apps, and Upgrade Dental, the growth roadmap that we have there, and of course the book, The Patient First Manifesto, all came out of thinking time sessions. And I think that thinking creatively like that, there is actually a strategy to strategize. And if you haven't thought about trying to solve issues in your practice by just using thinking time, try it out and read the book, The Road Less Stupid by Keith J. Cunningham. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.